Doug, good morning. Corruption is in the air today. Maybe it always is, but we don't notice it. With these Hunter Biden emails that have come out, it's kind of brought it to the forefront of people's imaginations, or at least mine. I just want to get your talk on corruption, political corruption, maybe your take on Biden in particular, and what you've seen around the world.
Yeah, well, my favorite quote on corruption comes from Tacitus, uh, who wrote about the year 120 AD, more or less. And he said, one of his most apposite quotes is he said, "The more numerous the laws, the more corrupt the state." And he's quite correct. What was true 2,000 years ago is equally true today. Uh, Corruption is a betrayal of trust. Now, you can have corruption in a private business where your employee steals from you or sells the company's favors to somebody else. But that's unusual because somebody's watching the store with the company, and corruption isn't part of normal business dealings. Corruption is something that you have, it's part and parcel of politics. I mean, that's where we see 90% of corruption, although companies deal with the state all the time today. So the state corrupts them and the companies have the money and give it to the politicians. Okay. So what I'm basically saying is, and what Tacitus said, is that the more laws that you have, it means you've got to get around these laws somehow, to get out of their straitjacket, to avoid their stupidity. And that's where the corruption comes from. It comes from the state and the coercion that is the state and trying to get around it. So we got to look at the government. And is the US as corrupt as other countries? Well, as we've gotten more and more laws, yeah, we've gotten more and more corrupt. There's no question about it. We have a different kind of corruption here in the United States than they do in third world countries. In third world countries, first of all, there's very little trust. So it's cash on the barrel head. If you want a favor, give me that suitcase full of $100 bills now. Here in the US, because the law enforcement system is more efficient and we're a high trust society, generally the way we do it here is, well, look at Obama. He had nothing when he came into office. Now he's worth $100 million or more. And I don't know what Michelle is worth. So, you know, time preferences in US society are such that you can wait 4 years before you collect your payoff, like the Clintons. You know, Bill famously said, "I don't even have the money to pay my legal bills." And now Bill's worth $100 or $200 million too. So the payoff comes after the fact, you know, when it's kind of sanitized and looks legal. So that's the nice thing about corruption in the United States. There's still enough trust that you wait for the payoff until you're out of office and are therefore safe.
Well, in the case of Biden with his son, this seems like it's not the case where they're waiting until it's safe and they're out of office.
Yeah, you're right. Biden has always impressed me as really being kind of stupid. And looking at various definitions of that word stupid, I actually think he has a low IQ to start with. I mean, around 100, you know, in the 90 to 100 range. He's no rocket scientist. So the way he engaged in corruption was really kind of stupid from that point of view. And another definition of stupid that I like to use is he was not only unable to see the indirect and delayed effects of what he was doing, he couldn't even see the immediate and direct effects, indirect and delayed. Couldn't even see the immediate and direct ones. So yeah, he got caught, but it's not nearly as big a scandal as it ought to be. The fact that hundreds of millions of dollars have apparently flowed into Biden's and his family's pockets. You know, you don't hear anything about it anywhere but Fox, quite frankly.
Right. And also the idea that, it came out, this is coming out now. There was obviously some news reporting on the possibility of some connection with Ukraine last year. But like, this has really come to the forefront recently because of Hunter Biden apparently leaving his computer at a repair shop, and the owner of the repair shop, turned it into the FBI and ultimately started shopping it around to other, Republican operatives or whatever. And it seems crazy that you would need some sort of bizarre accident like that for any of this to come to light. Like how is it possible that his colleagues in the Senate or other people in the administration or the FBI or somebody wouldn't have stumbled across this stuff before? Or did they? And maybe they just don't, maybe it's just common practice because it is technically legal, I guess, for your children to benefit from these things.
Well, one thing about the way this has come out is that it's further proof that Hunter Biden is a degenerate, a junkie, an idiot, besides that he'd leave a computer that has all these things on it and not even bother picking it up. What did he think was going to happen? So this guy's a moron. I mean, further proof that there was no good reason whatsoever for any of these foreign governments or whatever to give him dime one. He'd be lucky to be, listen, he's lucky he's not sleeping under a bridge doing crack. But this is part and parcel in Washington. It's thoroughly corrupt the way these people pass favors around and collect them later. And but talk about corruption. This is the bad thing about corruption when it amounts to stealing, slapping at the public trough and stealing. But from another point of view, corruption is necessary and a good thing if you're a private citizen, because there are so many laws that are passed by these Congresses and parliaments and other legislatures that you couldn't do anything unless there was corruption. In other words, corruption is a means of getting around stupid laws and obstreperous officials. It's so much easier to just give somebody a packet of money, small money in the case of many third world countries, big money in wealthy Western countries. It's so much easier to do that than pay lawyers and have the laws changed and lobby and so forth. So in the real world, where government is a major factor, corruption is necessary and corruption is a good thing if you look at it from that point of view. You have to make corruption your friend in a highly politicized society. The only way to solve the problem is not by passing new laws, making with huge penalties for corruption. The only way you solve corruption is by getting rid of all these laws that make corruption necessary and make it possible. It's actually quite simple, but there's no way that's going to happen because, the government and the kind of people that go to work for government live off of corruption. I mean, that's how they retire from office as multimillionaires or centimillionaires, all these senators.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. I haven't seen the numbers recently, but you look at the numbers of the average net worth of people that are in Congress. It's unbelievable. I mean, there's very few that are there for more than a couple terms and don't walk away millionaires. I mean, I just don't even know how that's possible.
Oh, exactly. And of course, in the third world, it's even more obvious. The reason, I mean, unless you're a power-hungry maniac, and there are plenty of people like that, they're in it for the power. That's what they really like. But other than that, the people under the top man, the next level down, that's where they're in it for the money. They don't want to be some, just some poor guy grubbing for roots and berries. They want to live like a North American. So they're all about the stealing, much more than the guy on top. Even if you talk about people like Mobutu and Mugabe and, God, I'm trying to think of more names of corrupt national leaders. it's the guys under him that steal the big money.
Hmm, interesting. So what are we supposed to make of this corruption that's come to light with Hunter Biden? I mean, are I mean, it seems so bold and so stupid, and I don't, but and yet it's not getting any attention from
No,
anybody, from the press. Is this just it? Part of the reason why it's, I wonder if there's just not an outcry is because everyone who really knows that this is actually the way everything is done, and yeah, maybe they were a little too indiscreet about a couple parts of it, but other than that, no, you don't have any congressmen or you don't have many senators that are bring this up. It certainly is an issue for the FBI, apparently, just because I mean, they would have to arrest everyone in the Senate if they went
yeah,
after
exactly. If you point the finger at one guy as being corrupt, then he might point the finger at you, and people start wondering, gee, I wonder if he's the only one that's doing this kind of thing. So none of them want to flush their comrades out for corruption because it's going to indict them all directly or indirectly.
that.
And the FBI, it's funny. I mean, Hoover was a scumbag, no question about it. He was, you know, power hungry criminal mentality, as far as I'm concerned. But at least in those days, I don't think the FBI was very corrupt. They were they were fairly straight arrows, whatever their other problems. They were fairly straight arrows. But now it's just a giant bureaucracy, and it's as corrupt as any other police force out there today. It's these people are political operatives in the FBI. They might start out as straight arrows, going through the training at Quantico and all this type of thing. But then the system eventually does corrupt them. So the FBI is not what it used to be. And, they're notorious for lying on the stand because number one is to, have a good track record, show they're competent and convict whoever it is that they're after. And if you have to bend the truth a little or a lot, well, that's okay. There's a greater good out there.
Hmm.
So the FBI is corrupt. The CIA is incredibly, unbelievably corrupt. I mean, they have so many black boxes and black programs that if you get into the CIA with all kinds of unmonitored payoff money, if you leave the CIA if you're not a multimillionaire or more after a few years, you're basically just a moron. So, and this is true. This is true of so many of these government agencies. This is a theme in the novel that just came out, Assassin. We talk about corrupt government officials and what should be done about them. Actually, we have several answers. One of them is in the title of the book, but there are other ways of solving the problem too. Yeah, it is a problem. It's despicable watching all these politicians that claim they're public servants. They're really just slime balls that are interested in stealing as much as they can, getting laid as much as they can, taking advantage of their young interns and so forth, and they love power. They love being lauded by the hoi polloi.
Yeah, I was talking with my girlfriend over the weekend and just reading about, there are a couple of different stories of types of corruption. One of them, of course, related to the Bidens, and I go, it's very discouraging for people who play by the rules, who really believe that you should try and do the right thing and, definitely be honest and forthright in what you're doing and all that. When it's clear that at least you have, well, it's clear there are a lot of incredibly successful people who basically at the heights of our society, who basically they haven't done any of that. Like they've totally gone the other way. And it's for people, I guess that's how cultures decay eventually, is if you recognition that there's that the rewards and punishments as a society are all made up, that they're all made up, that eventually everybody opts out of them, and then it just collapses from within itself.
Yep, you're absolutely right. You know, this reminds me of a friend I had who was a native New Yorker, Irish, and came from a big family, and half of his brothers were criminals, and the other half were cops, which often happened in both Italian and Irish families in New York. And so he was talking about Serpico. There was a movie made about a guy named Serpico who basically ratted out all the corrupt cops. And Mike said, "Yeah, that's Serpico. He was a dirtball. He was a rat, and there's nothing lower than a rat." The fact is, these cops were criminals. I mean, his brothers that were cops could easily have gone over to the criminal part, and his criminal brothers could have easily become cops because they were so corrupt. So most of the New York cops, I guess, I've never been a New York cop, but based on what Mike said, that most of the New York cops hated Serpico because he was a rat. Okay, nobody likes a rat, but you don't have to worry about a rat in the police force if you're not corrupt.
Right.
So it's like this everywhere. I don't know what you can do about it. Well, we go back to the cops should not be law enforcement officers because the laws inevitably cause and encourage corruption. They should be peace officers, not enforcing arbitrary laws where they need to be bribed so you can live a normal life, but just keeping peace in the society. It's much harder to bribe a peace officer because he's not enforcing arbitrary laws.
Hmm.
So, of course, cops are corrupt. They're constantly being offered bribes not to bust somebody for, having a joint in his car or for speeding or for 100 other things. So I think the longer you stay on the police force, the more you tend to be corrupt. Another movie I liked that indicated this was with Denzel Washington called Training Day. Did you see that?
Yes. Excellent movie. Yep.
Excellent movie. Denzel's a fantastic actor. Where he's the archetypical corrupt cop, and who was it? Who was the young white actor that wanted to get onto the drug squad? The young puppy,
Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke. That's right, and that was very indicative of exactly what happens after you're on a police force for
Mm.
long enough.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that people don't. It's weird how the corruption seems like it starts off as a shakedown and then of some kind, so you can still get around the rules, and then it becomes kind of institutionalized, and people stop seeing it as corruption. Like I just think about, you think about the taxes that you have to pay, the base case, and just the taxes that you have to pay. It is like the payoff to the mob in a way, right? For
Yeah,
protection, to be left alone, supposedly to be unhindered and move about your day and in a free way or whatever. And then those funds, of course, get used for really who knows what, who really knows what happens to them. But we see that as as not corruption. But obviously, I mean, you are paying people off just to be left alone, just to go about your business. You're not really paying for services.
exactly. In the third world, which is full of arbitrary and stupid laws, corruption is business as usual. You have to pay these people off, and they expect to be paid off. It's not as bad here in the US, but it's getting worse.
Hmm.
So there's no way out of corruption. Not passing. I mean, if as far as I'm concerned, if a senator or a congressman or a top bureaucrat, if they're caught in these web of corruption, I would throw the book at them. I'd be happy to put them in jail for many years and confiscate all their assets that are the fruits of the poison tree. Yes, that's one thing, but that's not the solution to corruption. The solution to corruption is getting rid of the environment and the laws that make corruption possible and make it necessary.
Hmm. Makes sense. So basically, wherever there is politics, there is corruption. Wherever politics is more sophisticated, where essentially more laws are developed, then the corruption only increases. And the only way essentially that you can ever resolve it is by essentially unwinding the politics, the involvement of the politics in the legal structure that's there.
I really think that's the answer.
Huh. Well, in the meantime, I do hope there's something with the Bidens that happens, because it just seems so incredibly wrong, that people can get away with that. But
Well, and incidentally, apropos of what we've talked about in the past as to who's going to win the election, I'm still convinced I forget which conversation we went over the 6 reasons why Biden was going to win.
yeah, I'll link to that episode in the notes here in the description.
Yeah, but at this point, unless there's a genuine October surprise and everybody knows about this corruption scandal with Biden, unlikely, because it's not going to be on any of the Main Street media or any of the big papers or anything like that. So the average person won't even know about it, or will just know glancingly about it. That's the only thing that can keep Biden from winning.
Mm.
It's really too bad.
Mm.
It's too
Unless
bad
there's
the whole US is corrupt at this point. It's terrible.
Yeah, it is. It is. Oh, well, I'm still hoping for some justice around this Biden stuff. Not justice, but at least exposure. People know it would be good, because people can make their own decisions if they can see the information.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm a big believer in justice, which is basically people getting what they deserve. And Biden and his son deserve long prison sentences and having their assets confiscated, because they're basically all stolen assets.
All right. Well, we'll leave it at that. Corruption is a big problem. Not going to go away as long as our system stays the way it is. So,
Right.
all right. Thanks, Doug.
Thanks, Matt.